Now let's look at some ideas about the future on a micro side. I think that, and this is already in the works, you've got to think about portable pensions, meaning you're going to carry your pension money, your retirement money around with you. It's not going to be run by a company, and it's not going to be run by the government. I think that Social Security will be cashed out. You might say we made an attempt to do that and it didn't go over well, but I think we'll make a renewed attempt as other countries in the world do the same thing, in particular China. There has to be some kind of formalization of choice. Right now, people make choices. You break up marriages, you overeat, you live a risky life, or just the opposite, you're very careful. And some people are burdens in society, and some people are not. But we don't generally hold people accountable. So I think there'll be some kind of ranking of people, how much choices you made, and whether you should be responsible for them or not. I think that consumption and savings patterns will change, in particular among the upper income people. I think people save way too much. I have friends of mine, he's got 3 kids, and I say, how much is it going to cost you to send him to college? He says, $1 million, just like that. He's convinced that he needs $1 million. I think it's just a dodge so that he can work and work and work and doesn't want to go home, and he's going to end up with way too much money. So I think you'll see that some people are over-saving, and they're going to have to either consume more, which they're probably not inclined to do, or just either work less. And career and lifetime work effort will change, and I think this is already in the works. The idea that people retire at age 60 or 64, or that they retire and never work again, that idea is dead. I mean, this is already in the works, but you'll find that there'll be more and more discussion of it in newspaper articles and in coffee table conversation and so on. Another thing will be that you'll have to be able to borrow against future labor income, or they will be advantageous to do it and somebody will make a market for it. When you're young, the only asset you really have is your future labor income, but you can't get at it. You have to wait for it to come to you. Now, you can borrow it to some extent by getting a mortgage that's bigger than you need, perhaps, and you can borrow to go to college if it's backed by the government, perhaps. But there's got to be some way that you can get access to future labor income for the right price, and I think it will arise. And there has to be some broad incorporation of the idea of smoothing lifetime consumption. This is the basic microeconomic idea about how you divvy up your money over your lifetime, smooth your consumption. You hear it in random places, but you don't hear it a lot. I think you'll hear it more and more and more because it makes sense. There'll have to be some market for people to hedge the future value of houses and perhaps human capital, meaning labor income. Up to now, houses went up in price and people kind of sat on them as an asset they'd use in the future. But now they have to worry that they're buying houses that are going to go down in value, and they're going to want some hedge against that. So I think some kind of financial instrument that will let you sell your house in the future might arise. This might sound outlandish, but my economic experience is that when something is really important to people, they really, really want it, they find a way to get it in a market and somebody peddles it to them. We like to be victims, and I could envision some way that we're going to brand and sell victimization. Again, I can't envision exactly how. Higher education has got to change. It's been so stepped up. It's a bubble like the housing bubble and the internet stock bubble and the commodities bubble. All the parameters on higher education have gone way off of long-time historical trends. Just like we saw home ownership rates went up and prices of houses went up way off trend and they came down. Something's got to happen in higher education. The mortgage interest deduction will be removed from U.S. taxes. Again, you might say we would never do that because the house is so important, but it really isn't, and I think we're learning that with this housing bubble right now, and I anticipate that that interest deduction will be removed from the U.S. tax code soon. Gift giving will become harder to do. I think there are more and more people with more and more money, and this is just an appeal to a basic economic idea. As you have more and more of something, its value goes down, and it's going to be harder and harder to give money away. Let's look at some ideas that are more, I'll say, political, social, or international. One thing is we see these national demographic trends like very low birth rates in Italy, Russia, and Germany, and so on. Those things will probably change. Again, just a basic economic story that as something goes way up or way down, it tends to go the other way. And I also think that cultural differences will become smaller. I read recently that in France they're getting rid of restrictions on the work week. And some people say, oh, well, they're always going to do it the French way anyway, but they're not. Those people in France who are inclined to work long and make a lot of money and be thrifty will do so. And so they become more economic and less French, and I think that's happening around the world. The surveying and related scrutinizing of people will diminish. I'll talk about this at length. I think we way over-survey people. It's very mean. It's unethical in some ways, and I think it's going to start taking on an ugly side, and then it's going to start to diminish. And the same thing with the emphasis on race, sex, ethnic backgrounds, and religious backgrounds. I think we've had enough of that. I say veterans of the 1960s counterculture will be vilified. I don't mean military veterans. I mean people who were young adults in the 1960s. Again, it hasn't happened yet, but when these people become less powerful, the new generation will turn on them. Comparisons among nations will become less common and less serious. We always compare across nations, and sometimes it's useful. Life expectancies across nations, per capita GDPs, number of gold medals won in the Olympics and so on, but they're becoming more and more silly all the time. The nation state is not the key. I think less government data will be collected. There's all kinds of data that the government collects that we really don't need to know about. Do we really need to know about people's religious background, for example? Is it really that important? Do we really need to know race any longer? I think we'll be a better society when we start collecting less government data. I think most people would agree with me, and soon enough that will become a public idea. I'm pretty sure that we are at a high point of hype and overanalysis in my adult lifetime, in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, and I think it's going to diminish, and I think people are going to look back and say, why were people so uptight about so many things? The candidate said this, he's apologizing profusely. So if we have all these ideas about what's going to happen in the future that other people aren't generally thinking of, how can we make money? That's something that I would always ask. I say, if you have a great idea, well, how can I buy or sell? We want to buy the things that are going up and sell the things that are going down. Well, first of all, you got to make sure they're new ideas. I think a lot of our ideas here are new ideas. And that's why I get so ticked off when people talk about the baby boom or about China. I mean, if you think you're going to buy pharmaceutical stocks because the U.S. population is aging and it's going to need more drugs, I think it's already been factored in. And the same thing if you think you're going to go look for Chinese companies that cater to the Chinese consumer because the Chinese consumer is growing, and you're going to buy those stocks, you'll find that those are already priced high. But then, even if you have some ideas that are new, and I think, again, a lot of our ideas are somewhat novel, you have to have some time frame that it plays out. And I mean, if the Federal Bank of the United States is gradually declining, it might take 10 years, it might take 100 years. And then you have to have some financial instrument, too, that you can take advantage of. If the people who babble about macroeconomics are little bit by little bit losing their prestige, how can you buy or sell shares in a macroeconomist idea? So I don't necessarily have any specific recommendations to pick this stock or that stock, but just look at these ideas. And if somebody comes up to you and he says he knows somebody who's peddling something to do with choice, or something to do with smoothing consumption, or something to do with getting rid of race and sex distinctions in society, before you dismiss them out of hand, say, is this something that's really in people's utility functions, that people really, really want, and that a market hasn't been created for yet? And then you might have something there.